Okay, first and foremost, I'd like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakakwadash, and double honors to the apostles, elders, and bishops of Great Millstone. And today we're going to be covering Daniel 11 and verses 10 and 11. But before we get to those, quick recap. Conflicts to come. Daniel 11 verse 1. Also I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and to strengthen him. Now Darius the Mede is historically known as Astyages, and he was the grandfather of Cyrus the Great on his mother's side, because Cyrus the Great is a Persian, because his father was a Persian. And now will I show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the fourth shall be far richer than they all, and by his strength through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. Now the king during this time was Cyrus the Great. And this is dealing with that Achaemenid Empire, that Persian Empire. So the king at the time was Cyrus the Great. So these 3 kings that were yet to stand up are the ones that come after him. And that first one was Cambyses II, which was his son, and Bardia, his other son. And that third one was Darius the Great, which is not to be confused with Darius the Mede. One was a Mede and one was a Persian. And the fourth shall be far richer than they all, and by his strength through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. Now this fourth king was the son of Darius the Great, which was Xerxes the First. It's on verse 3. And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. Now, this mighty king was Alexander the Great. He took down that whole Achaemenid Empire. So now, he's in his kingdom. That's why I said that shall rule with great dominion. He got great dominion. His dominion right now. He's the king reigning right now. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken. Now this is going into when he was at the height of his power, he died and his kingdom was broken, because it was divided and, the civil wars. And shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up even for others beside those. Now, like I said, his kingdom was divided, and the civil wars. At the end of those civil wars, you have four reigning generals of his, which is why it says, and not to his posterity, because his kingdom did not go to his descendants or his children or his offspring or anything. It went to his generals, and nor according to his dominion which he ruled, because those generals, they didn't follow how Alexander ruled. Because Alexander, there was a certain way and things he wanted to be ran. He wanted things, he was more he pushed that Hellenistic idea where he wanted everyone to be like Greeks, or he wanted them all to be one. But his generals, they pretty much, I'm not gonna say they discarded that, but they really just did their own thing. For his kingdom shall be plucked up even for others beside those. And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. Okay, so now this is, after Alexander, and the king of the south shall be strong. Now this king of the south is Ptolemy the First Soter. And that one of his princes is going into one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him and have dominion, and his dominion shall be a great dominion. This is speaking on Seleucus the First Nicator. So the king of the south was Ptolemy the First Soter, and the king of the north was Seleucus the First Nicator. And this is, like I said, this is after Alexander. So you have these 4 generals, and they're ruling these 4 areas. And now what's coming into play is those Syrian wars, which we're about to read about in verse 6. And in the end of years, they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begot her, and he that strengthened her in these times. So, like I said, now we're in the domain of those Syrian wars. And verse 6 specifically is speaking on the end of those Syrian wars, where the king of the south now is Ptolemy II Philadelphus, and the king of the north is Antiochus II Theos. Now they make an agreement, as basically like a peace treaty. And the agreement was Ptolemy II, his daughter is going to marry his daughter Berenice is going to marry Antiochus, and their son would basically become king. But in order for Antiochus to pretty much marry Berenice, he had to leave his first wife, Laodice. Now, time goes by and they're basically arguing over which one of their sons becomes king, Berenice's son or Laodice's son. And Laodice, she pretty much just she poisoned or killed or however Antiochus II. So he's out of there, and that's why they're fighting on who becomes king now. And she pretty much just kills Berenice and her son. So Laodice's son ultimately ends up becoming the king, and her son was Seleucus II. Seleucus II Callinicus. Verse 7, but out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against him, and shall prevail. Right, so this is going into the brother of Berenice, which is why it says, but out of a branch of her root shall one come up in his estate, which was Ptolemy III Euergetes. He comes and he finds out that, his brother has his sister was killed. So now he's angry and he makes war with the king of the north, which is Seleucus II Callinicus. That's why it says here, and he shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against him, and shall prevail. Now this was that third Syrian war, which he won. That's why it says, and shall prevail. And shall also carry captives into Egypt, their gods with their princes, and with their precious vessels of silver and of gold. And he shall continue more years than the king of the north. So the king of the south shall come into his kingdom, and shall return into his own land. So it's basically going into like how Ptolemy III, he basically returned to Egypt with their golds, their vessels, and all the other idols and, their things that were taken out of Egypt. So now on to verse 10. But his sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress. So Daniel 11 and 10, this is after the third Syrian war, where Ptolemy III Euergetes had waged war on Seleucus II Callinicus, and Seleucus II lost. Now upon Seleucus's death, what happens? Here. Now this is Seleucus II. Before he could launch this invasion, Seleucus died unexpectedly in 225 BC as the result of a fall from his horse. He was succeeded firstly by his eldest son Alexander, who took the name Seleucus III, and later by a younger son Antiochus III the Great in 222 BC. So these are the two sons who basically took over after Seleucus II, after his death, which is what Daniel 11 and 10 goes into. It says, but his son shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude in great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress. Now, let's look into this word stirred. What does this mean? He stirred up. Gara. To cause strife, stir up, contend, meddle, strive, be stirred up. PL, to stir up strife, excite strife. Hithpel, to excite oneself against, engage in strife, to excite oneself against foe, to wage war. So, right, they waged war. And we also have to remember that all of this is the Lord's doing. He put the spirit of these kings to go through war. He put the spirit on them to wage war. Proverbs 21:1. Proverbs 21 verse 1. The king's heart, which is going his mind, is in the hand of the Lord Yahweh. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. Right, so the Lord is in control. And what he was doing, stirring up the minds of these kings to make war, with each other, all these wars, was for the sake of prophecy. Now, going back, but his sons shall be stirred up. And as we read, the sons that were stirred up were the sons of Seleucus II, Seleucus III Cyrannus, and Antiochus III the Great. And shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come. And it says one shall certainly come because one ended up dying. And the one that died was who? Seleucus III. Now let's read more on Seleucus III. Seleucus III Cyrannus. Seleucus III Soter, called Seleucus Cyrannus, was a ruler of the Hellenistic Seleucid kingdom, the eldest son of Seleucus II Callinicus and Laodice II. His birth name was Alexander, and he was named after his great uncle, the Seleucid official Alexander. Alexander changed his name to Seleucus after he succeeded his father as king. Seleucus's rule was troubled and unstable. During his tenure, he unsuccessfully continued his father's war in Asia Minor against Attalus I of Pergamon. Seleucus was seen as being energetic and full of ambition like his father was. However, he lacked character and was usually very fickle, making him mostly unable to fulfill his ambitious ideas. He, however, in the eyes of many, did not suit his position. He was not very well liked by many as he did not fit their definition of a proper king, as much as he did try to prove the opposite. After a brief reign of less than 2 years, 225 to 223 BC, he was assassinated in Anatolia by members of his army, possibly at the instigation of his powerful minister, Hermias. His official byname Soter means savior, while his nickname Cyrannus means thunderbolt. So, that's Seleucus III Cyrannus, and there isn't, as we can see, there isn't really much on him because, like I said, he only reigned for 2 years, so he didn't really do much. Going back, but his son shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come, and overflow and pass through, and shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress. Right, so you had these two brothers that were stirred up, but only one came because one died, as we just read. So after Seleucus III was assassinated, his younger brother Antiochus III took over. So now let's read more on Antiochus III. Antiochus III the Great was a Greek Hellenistic king and the sixth ruler of the Seleucid Empire. Reigning from 223 to 187 BC, he ruled over the region of Syria and large parts of the rest of West Asia. He ruled over the region of Syria and large parts of the rest of West Asia towards the end of the 3rd century BC, rising to the throne at the age of 18 in April/June 223 BC. His early campaigns against the Ptolemaic kingdom were unsuccessful, but in the following years, Antiochus gained several military victories and substantially expanded the empire's territory. His traditional designation, the Great, reflects an epithet he assumed. He also assumed the title Basileus Magus, Greek for Great King, the traditional title of the Persian kings. A militarily active ruler, Antiochus restored much of the territory of the Seleucid Empire before suffering a serious setback towards the end of his reign in his war against Rome. So now that's more on Antiochus III. And now we know a little more about those two sons. So going back to Daniel 11 and 10. But his sons shall be stirred up, Seleucus III and Antiochus III, and shall assemble a great multitude. And shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through, and shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress. And this was Antiochus III the Great, gathering his armies and getting ready to wage war on Ptolemy the Fourth Philopator and the Ptolemaic Empire. So Daniel 11 and 10 is dealing with the two sons of Seleucus II Callinicus, who were Seleucus III and Antiochus III, but mainly Antiochus III because he is the one that comes over and goes to war with Ptolemy IV, which was the king of the south at the time, in verse 11, which we're about to read. In Daniel 11, verse 11, and the king of the south shall be moved with choler. And, like I just said, the king of the south at the time was Ptolemy the Fourth Philopator, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north. And the king of the north at the time was Antiochus III the Great. So you have this war between Ptolemy IV and Antiochus III, which was that Fourth Syrian War. And he shall set forth a great multitude, which was, going into how large of a war that this was, and how large of a multitude that was brought on both sides, which caused that, the scale of the war to be so huge. But the multitude shall be given into his hand, right? Because Ptolemy IV ends up winning this Fourth Syrian War. And so now, read more on this Fourth Syrian War. Upon taking the Seleucid throne in 223 BC, Antiochus III the Great, 241 to 287 BC, set himself the task of restoring the lost imperial possessions of Seleucus I Nicator, which extended from the Greco-Bactrian kingdom in the east, the Hellespont in the north, and Syria in the south, which, this is where the problem was because Syria is contested. By 221 BC, he had reestablished Seleucid control over Media and Persia, which had been in rebellion. The ambitious king turned his eyes towards Syria and Egypt. Egypt had been significantly weakened by the court intrigue and public unrest. The rule of the newly inaugurated Ptolemy IV Philopator, reigned 221 to 204 BC, began with the murder of Queen Mother Berenice II. The young king quickly fell under the absolute influence of imperial courtiers. His ministers used their absolute power in their own self-interest to the people's great chagrin, and chagrin meaning vexation or displeasure. So the king is young, right? And you have these ministers who are all trying to take advantage of that young king, which causes friction because they're all trying to get their influence in, which led to the displeasure of the people. Antiochus sought to take advantage of this chaotic situation. After an invasion in 221 BC failed to launch, he finally began the Fourth Syrian War in 219 BC. He recaptured Seleucia Pieria as well as cities in Phoenicia amongst them Tyre. So, looking at the map here, we have Seleucia Pieria over there in Antioch, or near Antioch, here in Phoenicia, Tyre. So these are places that Antiochus III recaptured. And he had to recapture these places because the Ptolemies gained, these are areas that the Ptolemies gained possession of in that previous war, which was the Third Syrian War, or the Laodicean War, that was between Ptolemy III and Seleucus II, in which Ptolemy III won. So he recaptured not only from, he recaptured Seleucia, Pieria, as well as cities in Phoenicia, amongst them Tyre. Rather than promptly invading Egypt, Antiochus waited in Phoenicia for over a year, consolidating his new territories and listening to diplomatic proposals from the Ptolemaic kingdom. Meanwhile, Ptolemy's minister Sosibius began recruiting and training an army. He recruited not only from the local Greek population, as Hellenistic armies generally were, but also from the native Egyptians, enrolling at least 30,000 natives as Phalangites. This innovation paid off, but it would eventually have dire consequences for Ptolemaic stability. In the summer of 217 BC, Ptolemy engaged and defeated the long-delayed Antiochus in the Battle of Raphia, the largest battle since the Battle of Ipsus over 80 years earlier, which this is what we read about here in Daniel 11, verse 11. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north. And here it says what? Ptolemy engaged and what? Defeated the long-delayed Antiochus. And he shall set forth a great multitude, which is going into the scale of this war. Ptolemy engaged and defeated the long-delayed Antiochus in the Battle of Raphia, the largest battle since the Battle of Ipsus over 80 years earlier. So that's why it says here, and he shall set forth a great multitude, because that war was of a very large scale. But the multitude shall be given into his hand, right? Because Ptolemy the fourth won the war, as we just read. Ptolemy engaged and defeated the long-delayed Antiochus in the Battle of Raphia. So continuing reading, Ptolemy's victory preserved his control over Gaul Syria, and the weak king declined to advance further in Antiochus' empire, even to retake Seleucia Pieria. And when we cover that Fifth Syrian War, we'll see how Ptolemy IV basically letting Antiochus III retreat and live to fight another day. It's going to come back to bite Ptolemy in the back, because that's exactly what Antiochus decided to do. He came back to fight another day. The Ptolemaic kingdom would continue to weaken over the following years, suffering from economic problems and rebellion. Nationalist sentiment had developed among the native Egyptians who had fought at Raphia. Right, so these native Egyptians, because they've now fought in the war, they have basically gained this like a national pride. But then they start thinking to themselves like, hold on, bro. These ain't even our people. These Edomites, they conquered us. And this thinking had led them to rebel. That led to rebellions. Confident and well-trained, they broke from Ptolemy in what is known as the Egyptian Revolt, establishing their own kingdom in Upper Egypt, with the Ptolemies finally reconquered around 185, which the Ptolemies finally reconquered around 185 BC. So, yeah, going back, one more read through, Daniel 11 verse 10. But his son shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up, even to his fortress. And this is basically going into how Antiochus III builds up his army and comes to wage war on Ptolemy IV Philopator. In verse 11, and the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north. And he shall set forth in great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hand. Now, this is basically going into how Ptolemy IV comes to, he retaliates. He comes to fight Antiochus III in that fourth Syrian war, and he ends up winning. So, yeah. With that being said, once more, I would like to give all praises and honor and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Regak Wadash, and double honors to the apostles, elders, and bishops of Great Millstone. And Lord willing, this video was edifying. And Shalom.